All right, and just since we have everybody on here, again, I think you all have the agenda, but we are basically just looking for this to be a space where people can share their experiences, lessons learned, and also hear a little bit more altogether from state and federal agencies, what initiatives you all are working on. But we will start out with a brief presentation from Eric Larson, who's agreed to join us to talk about current snow conditions and the spring forecast for the Yellowstone. Eric?
Yeah, all right, let me share my screen here. Give me a thumbs up if you can see that. All right, good deal. All right. Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I'm Eric, water supply specialist with NRCS, and here to give you guys a snowpack and potential stream flow update for this spring. As I was looking for a cover picture for this presentation, as I was putting this together last Friday, my iPhone popped up, just randomly said, here's a memory from 1 year ago, and it was a float we did on the Yellowstone on April 2nd. And you know, Friday it was snowing in Livingston. It felt like winter was still in full force. So very different conditions than last year at this time. Nice sunny day on the Yellowstone River. All right, jumping right into the snowpack here. We've had, you know, pretty good precipitation all water year since October 1st so far. I think pretty much the only real slow period we had in precipitation this water year was kind of the first part of January, which is a little reminiscent of last year when we went from January into February and March with like record low precipitation, which left us with a really low snowpack on April 1st. So this is shown on the left. We have our snowpack as of last Friday for this year. And then on the right is a map of last year at the same time. So this year we are doing great for snow. You'll see in the next slide, we're not really breaking many records, but significantly better than last year at this time. So this is looking at snowpack as a percentile for snowtail sites in the Upper Yellowstone River Basin. On the left is this year. So as a percentile, so meaning that if you ranked all the years, entire period of record of snowpack for that date, end of day, March 30th, from highest to low, or from lowest to highest, if you're, you know, the lower end, near 1, you're at the lowest snowpack on record. But if you're at the upper end, you're 100, you're the highest snowpack on record. So this year, we're at about the 75th percentile in the Upper Yellowstone River Basin. You know, the snow in Cook City is about the 50th percentile. Comparing that to last year, snowtail stations we're reporting near record low conditions on April 1st. And I always find it easier to visualize the snowpack rather than snow water equivalent to snow depth. So I wanted to include this. Snow depth last Friday, first thing in the morning, for this year on the left, and then last year, same time on the right. So yeah, as you can see, we have, you know, 100 inches of snow at Fisher Creek Snowtail in Cook City, upper elevations in Cook City. The thing to point out here is the snow is really deep at the lower elevations. So Burnt Mountain near Red Lodge has about 4 feet of snow. East Boulder Mine, almost 4 feet of snow. And just comparing that to last year when there was, you know, really low snow in the lower elevations. All right, so this chart is showing us our snow water equivalent peaks. So vertical axis is the snow water equivalent. On the horizontal axis, we have all snowtail sites within the Upper Yellowstone River Basin. So when I say Upper Yellowstone, I'm referring to everything essentially above Billings. So all the tributaries above Billings. And So lowest elevation on the left, with Burnt Mountain is the lowest elevation snowtell site at about 5,800 feet. And on the right, Parker Peak Snowtell is the highest elevation snowtell site. The gray bar is the normal SWE for this date. The blue bar is the current SWE for this date. The red dot is the normal peak, so the highest point in which snowpack gets to at each one of these sites on an annual basis. And then the black dot is the peak for this year. So since we're still accumulating snow this year, that black dot is the current SWE. Once it starts melting, the blue will start dropping. But the main point in this plot is that our lower elevation snow has already exceeded the normal peaks for the year and is still accumulating in a lot of places. But then the upper elevation snow has not yet to reach the normal peaks. We have above normal snowpack at those locations, but snow typically peaks like at some of these higher elevation sites near the end of April or in early May. Just another SWE plot looking at a lower elevation site. So this is Box Canyon Snowtell up Boulder River. So the vertical axis again is snow water equivalent, and then your time frame on the horizontal axis. So black line is this year. As you can see, Box Canyon has already exceeded its median peak. The gray line is the median value. This peak is calculated by looking at just the highest point at which it got to each year. Because if you're just doing the daily median, it's kind of buffered by the low years and the high years. So this is just it looks at the peak value and the peak date separately. So we've already exceeded that for this year. The purple line is last year, and then the upper and lower bounds are the maximum and minimum. So like 1997, as you all know, is a big year. That was what defined that upper line. And then you're looking at an upper elevation site, Fisher Creek Snowtell. So black line, of course, this year, and just showing that we above normal snowpack, not even close to what we were at 1997, this time frame. But yeah, there's the peak right there. So we still need to accumulate snow. If it stopped snowing today, we wouldn't reach our normal peak for the upper elevation snowpack in the Upper Yellowstone Basin. And then, of course, last year, this line, so June 13th was the date of the flood, of course. So it's about right there is where the snowpack was last year when it got a bunch of rain. And then I thought I would talk more specifically about peak flows, because the NRCS provides long-term stream flow, volumetric stream flow forecasts, March 1st through June 1st. So like 4-month volumetric stream flow forecasts you might have heard about. But since this is a flood-related conversation, I thought I would talk more about peak flows. So this, I chose to look at the entire Upper Yellowstone River Basin on the same chart. And so this year, of course, is the black line again, and I picked 4 similar years in terms of snowpack. So those are about the closest years I could find by clicking on all the different years. And just take note of 2020, which was probably about the most similar year, the snowpack that we currently have basin-wide in the Upper Yellowstone River Basin. And let's see, so I took all the peak flows for select USGS gauges across this region. So with all those years, these were the instantaneous peak flows, thanks to the USGS. So Yellowstone at Livingston in 2020 peaked at 30,600 CFS. I put the median on the right here. So it's the median instantaneous peak flow for those gauges, which is in green. Anything in blue peaked slightly above that median. Anything in yellow peaked below that. So kind of look at that. The thing to note here about 2020 is that snowtell sites received 2 to 3 inches of rain prior to that peak on all these rivers in the region. So rain-induced peak flows. It's hard to say what, I mean, you can't just base those peak flows, obviously, just off the snowpack, as we saw last year. 4 to 5 inches of rain on snow can cause a lot of runoff, obviously. So And then just right here, I also looked at the highest 3 years and lowest 3 years for those similar gauges. So of course, last year set the highest record instantaneous flow in all the gauges. Some of the lowest years were 2001, 1987, and so forth. And I think that's all I have for you. Just that is all I have. I have a couple of slides if you guys want to talk about valley snowpack too. I have some of that, but I thought I would take the time to answer some questions. This is just a picture of last year. I took that about 6 blocks from my house on the Yellowstone River, the day of big flood. So yeah, any questions?
Yeah, we do have a little time for questions. And Eric, I don't know if you want to stop sharing your screen, let people see one another again. Might be a great idea.
Sure.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Questions?
Eric, could you share that PowerPoint with us?
Absolutely. What's the best way to do that? Should I throw it in the chat here? I'm not sure if there's email it.
Oh yeah, that'll throw it in the chat, but you can also send me a copy. I'll be sending a follow-up email in the next week or so. But yeah, if in the chat, if you've got a link, would be great too.
Yeah, sounds good.
I had a question, Eric. Do you are you able to see, like, compare how other years that had higher low elevation snowpacks, what those runoffs were like? I'm just curious, just because that seems kind of, is that unusual, I guess, what we're seeing? It looked like it because it was kind of surpassing some of the long-time median peaks, and what effect that might be.
Yeah, Jeanette, I haven't specifically looked at that yet, but it wouldn't be too hard to do by just looking at, like, the example I showed of Box Canyon. You just kind of look for some similar years off that and pick some other low elevation sites. I mean, you know, in terms of like a couple inches of, in the valley, I know we have a lot of valley snowpack right now. We got, what, 2 to 3 inches of sweet in the valleys. I mean, that compared to the 30 to 40 inches we have in the mountains isn't really, that much. It's all about timing, of course. So depends how fast that low elevation snow comes off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it's really interesting. Thanks for showing that. I think it's interesting to see how it feels, because there's so much snow down low that, oh my gosh, the upper mountains must just be loaded. But it's kind of interesting to see that it's above normal, but not like just a record year by any means. Yeah, I think this will be really good for our drought. That's for sure. Getting some hydration or bringing those soil moisture contents back up.
Yeah.
Eric, have you looked at April temperature forecasts to sort of see what that looks like in terms of runoff timing yet? I'm sure that's in the water supply report that I.
Yeah, today is the day we start writing the water supply outlook report. And I haven't specifically looked at the Climate Prediction Center stuff, but I mean, it's right here. In terms of April, I did hear there was kind of a low pressure or high pressure system rolling in the near future, kind of some more common spring-like temperatures. But let's see here. Yeah, I mean, the 6 to 10 day outlook is for Southwest Montana, chances of above normal temperatures, and the 1 month outlook from the National Weather Service is more chances of below normal temperatures. So it could slow things down a little bit in terms of melt, which also we don't want it to slow down too much. Otherwise we're hanging onto that snowpack too late into, closer into June, which can cause issues.
Okay, we've got time for probably one more question. And if not, we can move into the local partner updates.
Yeah, I might just jump in one, and this Mike Ruggles out of Billings with Fish, Wildlife and Parks. You maybe hit it, and I'm sorry for coming in late. Had another call, but Just wondering about the ice forecasts through any of those valleys, kind of where you're at for prediction of ice jams or what you're thinking.
Yeah, I'm not sure, honestly. I don't get really involved with the ice forecasts, valley temps. I really couldn't give you a strong answer on that.
Yep, no worries. Thanks.
Yep.
Real quick, this is Brooke over here in Rock Creek. Eric, you had just touched on briefly something about soil moisture. How will that, I mean, is there levels that we're aware of at this point? I don't know how that works with the gauges, but how will that impact some of that runoff? I mean, we're Burnt Mountain, like you said, I think we're at like 226% or something on Burnt Mountain, and it's supposed to be 60 degrees on Saturday. So, you know, there's already a little bit, folks are already nervous here in our valley, and we're going to see some major runoff this weekend. Will that impact that at all?
You know, soil moisture, like especially leading into the season, like what we had prior to the seasonal snowpack started accumulating. What our conditions were leading into that is a big component of how quickly it'll run off and how much will be absorbed into the soils rather than initially run off. And we did have somewhat of a dry period leading into the water year, the seasonal snowpack. So a lot of that will hopefully buffer some of it and get absorbed by the soils, and at the same time, as Jeanette mentioned, kind of improve some of the drought conditions we were experiencing last summer. So yeah, we need more monitoring, honestly, for soil moisture at our snow-tell sites. So we can give you a better idea of what it was. Like Burnt Mountain doesn't have soil moisture, so I can't give you a perfect example on that, but yeah, it's hopefully it absorbs some of it.
Oh, yeah, fingers crossed. All right. Well, thank you, Eric, for that presentation. Like I said, I will, if you send me a copy, I'll send that out with a follow-up email in a few days or a week. You can also drop it in the chat if you want. And
Perfect.
now we'll move into just the time for each county's representatives to answer those questions that I put out, and I'll drop those in the chat right now too. But basically we're asking whoever was going to speak from each county to just touch on, you know, what are the main flood recovery and resilience initiative programs or projects you focused on in the last 6 months? What has worked that would be useful to share with other local watershed and emergency coordinators? And what lessons have you learned that would be useful to share with the others on the call? So we could go alphabetically with Carbon County. Does that sound reasonable?
Could we start with Stillwater, if you don't mind? Tommy's got to log off in a little bit.
Oh.
And if that works for you guys, I hate to step in front of Carbon County.
That's great. Thanks, Lizzie.
Yep. Tommy, are you prepared? Or maybe not.
Yeah, I see he's on there, but still muted on the iPhone.
Okay. Well, we'll start with Carbon and I'll try to get a hold of him.
Okay,
Thank
thanks. All right, Carbon County.
Hi, it's Brooke again, for those of you that can't see, but I'm not sure, Sharon, we didn't coordinate very well before this. So Sharon, anytime you want to jump in here, please feel free. I know that our DES, Serena with DES and Courtney with the Red Lodge floodplain are in Billings today on a hazard mitigation plan workshop. So they've truthfully dealt with much more of the flooding than we have as an organization. Clark's Fork Yellowstone Partnership is, for those of you that don't know, we're a very young watershed group, like 4 months old. So we were really just coming in at the tail end of the flooding. But one of the things that we did do recently that Terry asked me to speak about was a stream permitting panel meeting. And we held that over on the Clark's Fork. That, as many of you know, they're a lot more lower elevation than us. So they're already starting to see some runoff issues over there. So getting in the creek is a lot more going to happen a lot quicker for them than it is here on Rock Creek. But just a couple of things about the stream permitting panel. It was fun. It was a neat meeting. We had, let's see, Sage, I don't know if Sage is on the call today, but Sage Joyce from the Army Corps of Engineers on the panel. Brian was on the panel. Sharon was on the panel. And then Paige Dringham from Floodplain was also on the panel. And we just sent out an invitation to the community to come down, and the primary objective was to talk about the joint application form and kind of go through that and have folks bring their 310s with them if they had already started them, and bring their questions. Truth be told, there wasn't a whole lot of questions about the joint application form. Sharon did an awesome job of really going through a pretty comprehensive introduction of that form. And then we touched on some of the questions that the Conservation District Board gets on those kind of forms. Brian went through, you know, kind of what happens at the on-site meetings. And it was pretty great. Folks, again, didn't have a whole lot of questions afterwards about that. But we kind of went through with some canned questions, just hitting on some of the things that folks had mentioned previously, you know, remapping the floodplain, landowner signatures on permits, sage grouse habitat. And Mike jumped in and helped us out with that question, which was great. So there was, like I said, not a lot of questions there, but what really came out of it for us was that folks had an opportunity to actually put a face with a name. And that seemed to be really, really important. There was a lot of good camaraderie, I feel like, that came out of the meeting. Really an opportunity for the public to see that they are real people, that, you know, there's you know, they're there to do a job, but talk to them, and don't be afraid to ask questions. So that was the great part. Brian and Mike got back to me with some awesome feedback, maybe an opportunity for a follow-up there, meeting about doing something other than just riprap as a means of mitigating potential flooding. So that was great feedback on that. Oh, there's Tommy. And other than that, the only other thing that we've really been concentrating on from the Clarks Fork Yellowstone Partnership perspective is helping with grants. That's something that's come up in our watershed as a result of flooding, is that there's really no good resource for folks as far as help in writing some of these grants to get funds on flood mitigation. So Sharon and her office have been doing an amazing job trying to keep up with all of the additional work that came from the flood. And so our watershed has kind of stepped in and tried to help those folks with those with those grant questions, like how to even start that grant writing process. Sharon, are there other things that you wanted to jump in and visit about?
Nothing that I can think of. If there was any questions, but yeah, there's going to be some opportunities coming up, but my workload is it's beyond its peak right now. So yeah, so we're just taking it one day at a time right now.
From the irrigators aspect, there's some of our three of our largest ditches, two on the Clarks Fork and one on the Rock Creek side, have all applied for and been awarded both the EWP and ARPA grants. And so there's a lot of work that they're getting ready to do here in the next couple of weeks, especially over on the Clarks Fork side. And so the feedback that we've been getting from them is that they're going to need some additional help. So I guess from the aspect of both our in Carbon County Conservation District and the Clarks Fork Watershed Partnership, from state agencies, whatever help we can get on those grants, I think would be greatly appreciated. That's all I've got.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Brooke and Sharon, for both being on here. And oh, it looks like Sarah had, but go ahead,
I'm
Sarah.
sorry, quick clarifying question, Brooke. When you say additional help from agencies, are you talking more funding or help with like, what could you just clarify?
Sure.
With
Sure, absolutely, Sarah. More help in not necessarily the funding, though I'm sure that would be welcome, but how to go about the process. I know that there's still EWP, the irrigators that we've talked to, they're starting to get involved in those grants. How do they get reimbursed, and those sorts of things are the questions that are coming up. How do they get certain things approved, especially like the ditch over here on Rock Creek? They're not working with a engineer that has a whole lot of experience with the government grants. So there's a lot of questions there. And then ARPA, nobody really knows where to get started with that. And so there's a lot of questions. They've been awarded, but no, not necessarily the contracts haven't been signed. They still need help with sponsorship, those sorts of things.
Yeah, so part of the reason that is that we have to make sure that the district is not, you know, that we're not holding, that we're not responsible. So a lot of people are just going and doing what they want and are not in compliance. So if people are doing that, then the district is not going to participate and be a liability to it. So so contracts have been held off because of work already being done, and that it voids the grant. So, and I can't take that chance. So yeah, so that's part of the problem, is that it takes time for this. I mean, you know, we have some emergency funds, we have the EWP going, but for ARPA is different. ARPA, you have to follow their rules, and there's no, you know, forgiveness there.
Right.
So
Right.
it's really scary when you're talking about this much money, and you know, making sure that we are in compliance as a district, because we are, you know, responsible. So yeah, so it's not just a here, sign and we go. It's making sure everything is in place.
Right.
So
Great, thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, thanks for that. And also thanks for that reminder to, you know, as our state and federal agency partners are listening in on this, I know your part isn't specifically to address these concerns, but, you know, please be listening and, you know, during your portion, as you're talking about the services you're offering, be thinking about these concerns as well. So now we'll move on to Stillwater. I think Tommy's got his iPhone. Yes, there we go.
Yeah, I think it's working now. Sorry for the chaos I'm causing with my microphone. And my iPhone sometimes doesn't respond to my touch anymore. Okay, here's the video. I can okay, hopefully you can see me now. Yeah, my name's Tommy Flanagan. I'm working with the Stillwater Valley Watershed Council closely with Lindsay Clark and I'm happy to talk a little bit about what have been doing with our RAT team since the last time we talked. The RAT, as a reminder, is River Assessment Triage Team that we kind of modeled after the work that was done on the Musselshell River during the periods of flood that they had starting in 2011. It's essentially a team of experts from different areas. We've got Karen Boyd, who's a morphologist, studies the river, Tom Osborne, and we actually have Brian on there. Sharon works with us, and then of course Lindsay from the Watershed Council and myself. And I kind of play more of an organizational role in it now. And our goal was to really get out and do site visits at different landowners who submitted our landowner survey, anyone who indicated they had damage that we want to look at. And the RAT team was going to look at the river kind of as a whole and make kind of general best practice recommendations about what can be done. So we got about 60 or so, little over 60 applications or landowner surveys back, and kind of compiled that into about 30 site visits. We combined some that you could see from one part, you could see more than one site, that type of thing. So we ended up actually seeing, or I wasn't there on the site visits, but the team saw 30 different places. And March was a hard month to get any time in to go view the river, just because of the amount of snow that we've had. You want to get a good look at the river, but we finally had 3 days where they were able to get out and look at the sites. So we divided it, the upper Stillwater, middle Stillwater, lower Stillwater, and then the East Rosebud, where we had different sites. And talking to the team, it was cold those days, so they did what they could, but they got through all of the sites. And doing a little bit of debriefing with the team, some stuff that we're seeing or hearing that I think is interesting. And Brooke mentioned this, that there is potentially some payoff for waiting a little bit on some projects. It seems like this was something that Karen also echoed from her work in the mussel shell, that sometimes after these big events, those who can afford to wait a little bit before an aggressive major kind of intervention might actually pay off in the long run. Because now we're at the point where we're getting to be far away from when the flood actually happened, right? It's going to be a year before we know it. And then really looking at what is the new high water mark, that's going to be really informative. So that's one thing I heard echoed from the team a lot, is that there might be other solutions than just riprap in places, because that might actually, exacerbate the problem in some areas. And then especially if other, we all know how that works. If above you and below you kind of does a different treatment, then, that may be more or less helpful. So there's that one. The other kind of thing that comes in is, the cost benefit analysis of things, right? You got to look at how much the land, how much worth we're talking about on a certain property versus how much the intervention or the treatment would cost versus, the cost for actually waiting or another catastrophic event tearing things apart. So the RAT team is really looking at those bigger umbrella questions. We've also been really funded mostly so far from donations from community organizations. So all the community foundations in our area have donated. So we're keeping people updated on that. We're going to write a little bit of a write-up for the newspaper to come out about what we've learned so far. So the participation's really been high. I think that the team has found some interesting things, but also a lot of echoes with the mussel shell, right? A lot of the similar issues coming up there. So I think those were kind of the three major points I had from the team. But of course, we have Lindsay here. Brian's been on the team as well and was participated in 2 of those site visit days. So if you guys have anything to add, that would be great. In terms of funding, we're looking for funding for kind of the next project, right? We want to boil down what we found from the RAT team and see if there's actually some project that we could apply for some funding for through the Watershed Council or in collaboration with the CD. So we're looking at that kind of for the next stage. And for the people who kind of live in the area, we're hoping to have kind of a public meeting that's open to people in our watershed, in our community, to come and see the imagery we have. We have some really good imagery post and pre and post flood LiDAR imagery of, you can really very clearly see where the damages are. What did the place look like pre and post flood for the entire Stillwater and Rosebud drainages? So we want to show that to people, and we want to talk about our major takeaways. So there will be a community kind of educational event scheduled for probably not before June, I would imagine, but we'll certainly keep everyone informed, and you're all welcome to come to that. So if Lindsay or Brian had anything they want to kind of add from that, that'd be excellent. If not, any questions?
No, I think you hit it really well. Brian, do you have anything that you'd like to add since you were in the field with us at the time?
No, I think you got all of our our points that we came up with. Well done, Tommy.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thanks. And we will have some time a little further on in the agenda for a little more discussion and questions. So if people do have questions for Tommy or for Brooke and Sharon and everyone else for that matter, we'll have time for that too. So let's move on to Park County. I think there were a few people from there who wanted to speak.
I can start off. It's Greg Coleman, Park County Emergency Management. A number of local groups are engaging recovery and resiliency from different perspectives. Our United Way and the Park County Community Foundation and the Yellowstone Community Foundation, they're all coordinating with the Southwest Montana Flood Relief Fund. That was assisting individuals, businesses, and nonprofits recover from and prepare for future flooding. They've administered that fund in different phases, and the current phase right now, and I believe it's the final spend down phase, is to support the nonprofit organizations that have work related to flood prevention and recovery. Let's see, the Upper Yellowstone River Advisory Committee is another group that I'm participating with, and their focus is more on landowners and permitting. And then there's another group, the Northern Rockies Economic Development District is convened a recovery and resiliency group. We've had 2 meetings, and their focus is more toward the business community. Original issues identified for them are industry diversification, infrastructure, available resources, reactiveness versus preparedness, and enhancing in communications and short-term recovery. Our nonprofits are also coordinating. We're sort of following the Southwest Montana COAD, and we're trying to organize some of the Livingston nonprofits into a Livingston chapter under the Southwest Montana COAD group. Let's see, our health department, we requested early on in the flood disaster for mental health supports, and we tried to engage the crisis counseling program. That is just now coming online. They're hiring people for the program, and we'll be rolling it out. Ideally, that's something that would have been coming on sooner, but I think we'll have a lot of lessons learned there. We're certainly going to start off with mental health supports as a primary request for any disaster of this scope. Let's see. Our Public Works Department is still engaged with public assistance FEMA PA projects. We're still working on those. I'm not sure exactly where we are in the process. And then FEMA is prepared to support us with recovery planning. And I've asked them to actually hold off because we are still we're still hands-on with coordinating all these other groups and everything. And the overall goal is going to be, once I sort of understand what the different groups in the community are doing, is to bring all of those groups together and really try to distill the lessons learned from each perspective, whether that's the landowner perspective, the business community, the nonprofit, and really try to get a comprehensive community overview. Also, my office, I've been working on hazard mitigation applications. We're in the middle of the emergency debris removal project that the state is helping with. We're working with the Army Corps of Engineers and the Department of Natural Resources on channel migration zone mapping to better understand our risks from the flooding. And I'm trying to participate in as many meetings as I can to get that overview. So in terms of lessons learned and you know, what went well, I haven't really started assessing that. So, but that's where I am right now. Thanks.
Fair enough, Greg. Did Ashley, were you
I can,
or Wendy going to speak as well? Ooh, Ashley, you might be frozen.
Pick out a part of something that Greg touched on. My name is Ashley Laurie, and I've been coordinating the Upper Yellowstone River Assessment Committee, which has really been, like other watershed groups here, has been focused on the technical expertise in our watershed. So we have several agencies that have participated, consultants, hydro and geo consultants in our watershed. And the goals at the beginning was more triage, where we're responding directly to landowner assistance and trying to line up funding mechanisms and funding opportunities to landowners that are coming to us. And we've started to shift, and also permitting expertise. So we work with the Corps as well, CD, and now we've been shifting a little bit. Our last meeting was really around addressing, okay, so what are our goals moving forward? We're out in some ways of the immediate triage, the triage mode, and how do we want to approach this upcoming year? And we're seeing a lot of holes in need with continuous outreach and education. And we did produce a BMP, best management practices for flood in the fall, and seeing maybe there's a need moving forward with continuing outreach and education for landowners. And we also have landowners on our committee, and continuing permitting assistance and permitting coordination. So in some ways it acts as a venue for the different permitting agencies to say, okay, this is what we've been seeing, this is what we haven't been seeing. Let's bring it all to the table and see where some of these holes are at. But yeah, kind of shifting into a new mode with the new year and trying to adapt where we can fill in education outreach holes for our community.
And then I might fill in just the any other gaps that are been happening in Park County. So Jeanette with Freshwater Partners, we've been working pretty closely with Greg at the county level and the Conservation District, and then also the city. And our role with Freshwater Partners being a technical group, we're just trying to connect the dots between the different agencies. Everybody at the agencies are at maximum capacity and can only do so much. So we're trying to be that a hub, I guess, in terms of making sure there's good cross-pollination and also looking at things from the big picture and adding things from different perspectives. So more than 6 months ago, we had a similar to sort of the, in a way, kind of that stream permitting panel, but we did a multi-agency site visit on one of the local ranches that had just pretty much all the representative types of impacts that everybody was seeing happened on the one property. So it was a tour to have the agency see firsthand on the ground of what issues landowners were facing, and then we convened on ranch to kind of talk about that and just sort of identify, like, okay, what are some strategies for these landowners and to get through not only Corps of Engineers permitting, but the 310 permitting, and ways to avoid really expensive mitigation costs on top of the restoration costs as well. And then we sent that out to landowners. I'm not sure how much that got reviewed, but I like the idea of that, maybe a stream permitting panel just to go over that joint permit application to clarify things for landowners. The other thing that we had done is a low elevation flight or low altitude flight. So that was done by Chris Boyer, and we had a meeting. It was an Upper Yellowstone landowner working group meeting, and we had maps laid out and showed where, had landowners circle where their properties were, where the damage was, and what type of, what kind of photos they want to take in. And so Chris flew, we gave him those KMV locations from the map, and he flew that, and he got all of those locations from low elevation. And so they provide some really, it actually was done like post flood. So I think it was like back in September or something like that, or October, but got some really great aerial imagery. We sent that on to the state. So it is now geo-referenced on the Flood Hub map with the state library. So people can go in, they can click on it. We also sent that imagery directly to the landowners, but there's a great just sort of documentation of from low elevation aerials as well as people's videos of the flood event was uploaded onto the state flood hub library. What else? We've been participating in the Upper Yellowstone Advisory Committee. Look at my notes here. There's a lot going on. So we also have been one angle that we did, so one of the things that we had done was leading up to the flood, and we've been doing this project prioritization plan for just kind of typical restoration projects along the shields in Yellowstone. And then when the flood happened, we started rolling in flood related projects. So similar to what Tommy was talking about with maybe prioritizing projects that were impacted or properties that could do some restoration work post flood. We're working those into our prioritization plan so that it's ranked and kind of packaged up so that we could do grant recovery, get project funding through grants more easily. The other angle that we've been working on is the flood mitigation side, risk mitigation. So we've been working with Greg Coleman on that. The timing was good because the county is updating their hazard mitigation plan and talking with the state DES groups or office, realizing that if we can get our identify unmet needs and how we would address flood risks in our county's mitigation plan, that will set us up to be more competitive with emergency service dollars that are at the state and federal level. So we've done that, and then we are working with the county to, like Greg said, to get a new, an updated channel migration zone map developed for Park County just on the Yellowstone. And that's going to feed into a bigger strategy where we get the map done, we identify, and then we refer to these really great flood risk mitigation strategies that came out of Colorado from their floods. And you could look that up. I think it's called, it's just if you look at the Colorado water conservation flood mitigation strategies, it will come up. There's some really, really great information there. And so we're tying our flood mitigation strategies to those for the county in with those mitigation strategies that came out of Colorado, which is really looking at, like, you know, identifying areas where you can build in flood resiliency, properties where you can maybe put them keep them as open space or just ag production so that the river continues to have access to its floodplain, areas where we know there's going to be deposition and things like that. So you're building that into the system. And then strategies for reducing flood risk in areas that are already constrained, like around the city of Livingston, and making sure that structures are able to pass floodwaters better than they do now. So the CMZ map is really going to be informative and help us identify where those locations are. And then from there, we can prioritize those projects and go after bigger funds to really fix like major infrastructure issues. We have a big concern around our hospital, which is not in the channel migration zone or in the floodplain, but got surrounded by floodwater nonetheless. So this is all kind of in that prep stage to build the existing conditions mapping and the basis of needs so that we can really go after these larger funds in a more strategic and justified manner. I'm trying to think what else there. We're also hoping to be engaged with the city as they do a levy breach analysis, and we're hoping to be involved in that so that the city looks at this beyond just focusing on the levy and whether that's going to be redone at a certified levy status or just sort of a Band-Aid status, because that has implications on, you know, flood mapping and that sort of thing. But really looking big picture so that we're not just focused on a patchwork of repairs without looking at, like, how does building up the levee affect the properties downstream. Happens to be like a big property downstream is our hospital and things like that. So it's a really complex issue, and we're just hoping to be engaged in that to kind of help put the pieces together or keep that conversation more big picture, so that we don't get too siloed in the approach. Wendy, is there anything else that you can think of?
Yeah, I just might add that we're focusing on the bigger picture, future flood resiliency. So for example, there are discussions about where the city of Livingston is going to put a new wellness center, for example. And there's ideas of putting that adjacent to the existing levees. So we're trying to work with the city to have these conversations of essentially not repeating our past mistakes and putting infrastructure, other critical buildings right in the flood areas. So we're working on that. And then also thinking, where can we get additional flood attenuation or flood storage? So where are there opportunities with infrastructure to upsize culverts, get more capacity in that aspect? And then I think the last thing, so that hopefully we learn from the last year, we want to put out a press release and talk about what types of flood preparedness actions the community can take on a very basic level, how to get signed up for notifications. Maybe now is the time to get flood insurance, like all these very basic things, so that folks have an idea, like when this next flood comes, this is where you're going to go fill sandbags, and this is what you're going to do, and those sorts of things. So we're hoping to have that put together and out here in the next few weeks as well.
Thanks everybody for sharing. Oh, was there something else, Jeanette?
Well, I'll just add just from just a perspective on what has worked and what we felt was like really successful. I do think that this multi-stake or multi-agency meeting that we had right from the beginning, I thought was super helpful. And I do think that sort of catalyzed some really good outreach. I know Sage and Jade and there's another core person out there that I'm forgetting, but I've heard from landowners and others that it has been a much improved process, just having a project manager from the Corps like dedicated to a county, and there's people are appreciative of the extra effort that's happening there. One thing that's been interesting, probably shouldn't be too surprising, but doing the long-term flood recovery in terms of prevention is challenging. It's been challenging to get approvals to get our channel migration zone mapping updated because of the fear of that being kind of potentially weaponized to limit property rights and things like that on folks. So there's a lot of education that comes along with that, and it's a slow process on all ends, but I think it'll be worth it. But I do think that when it comes to flood recovery, I think getting folks on board with prevention is challenging because sometimes it takes changes in well, I don't know. It's just challenging, I guess. People are more used to dealing with a reaction versus planning ahead, I think. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Yeah. Very true. And yeah, that's what we're all trying to talk about all these things now and be thinking about the next disaster and the next flood. So thank you everybody for sharing on this. I did drop a link in the chat. I can't remember if I shared this, but all of the resources that were shared after our last meeting in October, I put together. We have a web page now on the MWCC website. And I just dropped that in the chat. So a lot of the resources people are mentioning are already in there. And if there are additional, I heard a couple additional things that people have been talking about. If there's anything else you'd want to share on that page and with this group, just let me know. Email that to me or drop it in the chat and I can include that there too in our next email. With that, we're going to hear from federal and state agency partners. Unless Sarah, you needed to say anything before we take a quick break. Okay. So yeah, let's take a quick.
Sorry. I have one more thing I wanted to say. I really wanted to say thank you to Carbon County. Actually, the watershed group there, one thing that was super helpful was as Park County was pulling together their grant application for this RDG planning grant for CMZ mapping, the folks that developed a similar grant out of Carbon County were really gracious about lending us their draft grant application. And that, since we are all so strapped with our time and capacity, that was super, super helpful. So I just think that is one thing that has been super helpful and great that, you know, anything that we can do to support each other is really, really, really helpful on an individual level. So I appreciate that.
That's good to hear, Jeanette. Yeah, and I hope, yeah, it's good to hear that that's happening. So before we hear from our state and agency, state and federal agency partners, let's just take a quick 5-minute break. We'll come back at 11:09. It's just a quick bathroom tea break, and we'll see you back here at 11:09. All right, if folks could turn on your videos just to let us know that you're back when you're back, that would be really helpful. Okay, well, hope everybody had a good stretch, moment to pause. Thank you for the emojis for those of you who may not be able to turn on your videos. So we're going to go into the next part of our meeting, which is hearing from our state and federal agency partners, some of our statewide partners in general. I did just drop the 2 questions that we have for them into the chat, and those are basically what initiatives or coordinated efforts is your agency leading to help with short, medium, or long-term recovery that the local coordinators on this call might want to hear about? And what are some of the institutional barriers? We know those exist, right, to using your programs to help with flood recovery and restoration. And what are some ways we all might be able to work toward changing those? And also, again, just keeping in mind, I know you're all here and listening to our local partners, and to the extent that you can address some of those concerns as well, that would be wonderful. And I don't have a set order. I know we've got probably a half dozen agencies on here, and we've got a little under a half hour. So I think I'm just going to trust you all to speak as succinctly as you can. And yeah, we'll just try to stick with that all collectively. Is there anybody who wants to jump in first from our state and federal partners?
I'll go first, Terry. Just as a reminder, Brian Giordano, I'm fisheries biologist, Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks. Really, our overall, I think our watershed groups have kind of hit on most of the stuff. We've been working pretty closely with them. So some of these panels we've been holding, we've been working closely with our conservation districts to try to get permitting as streamlined as possible, but also taking into consideration the impacts of these projects. I mean, most folks are concerned about protecting their properties, and rightfully so, but we also have to consider the other impacts that each one has. It's not just protecting one thing in a vacuum. So it's really a coordination effort between all of our agencies, and then also, landowners and folks that live in the area. So looking at short-term, medium, and long-term kind of ideas is, we understand, part of it is right after the flood, or right during the flood, was some emergency efforts. I mean, that was kind of the short-term stuff. But really, when we're looking at these projects and trying to help out with helping folks with these projects, we're looking for a long-term solution. We don't want somebody to have to come and fix their project every couple of years. That doesn't do them any good. It doesn't do the river any good, and it doesn't do their neighbors any good. So we want to make sure that we're working with these folks for long-term solid projects that function properly without too many impacts. So that's kind of the big one there. We have been looking at some debris removal projects that state DES is putting through. I would say the barriers to our programs and working, and we don't have a set program exactly, but we are responsible through FWP for permitting 124 permits, which is essentially the same thing as a 310, but for a government agency, so a city, a county. And what really helps us with these is if those agencies can come to us a little earlier. We have, within law, we are required to give our answer within 30 days. So that is a barrier for if you design a project and you give it to us, we have to review it and see if it falls within our permitting guidelines. But you're also by law, we're also supposed to be getting it 60 days before construction notice. And we're getting a lot of these coming in now that are, we need to get it done in the next 30 days. And that technically, if we have something we would like to see different in that project, we don't really have a lot of time to move forward with that and kind of change some things up and provide some recommendations. So that's a big one for us, is just kind of for me is the timing constraints and being able to work with those engineers or agencies to kind of better the project if need be.
Thanks for stepping up, Brian, and being the first to go. Did anybody else have, I know we've got a couple people from FWP. Did that pretty much cover FWP? Okay. Yeah, and just appreciating that.
Sorry, Jonathan Faree here. And excuse me, I was a little late to the meeting, but what I would say by observations thus far with what I've the processes I've gone through for this Red Lodge site that Brian was just alluding to, you know, phase one was a retaining wall, right? So that's been ongoing, and phase two is they're going to dredge out the river, and then phase 3 is kind of where I would like to believe Brian is talking about, with a longer term, larger scale restoration project that folks would like and the fisheries would like, and yeah, so that is my feedback. So having approved the retaining wall and the dredging currently with 124 permits, I am looking forward to the phase 3, which is the larger restoration project. However, whatever form that takes.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that, Jonathan. Those longer term effects, and also for the acknowledgement from Brian that obviously everyone here is pretty at capacity with everything, and that includes our state and federal partners. And yeah, just trying to work through all of that together. Other state and federal partners.
Hi, this is Sage Joyce. I can pipe up for just a minute about kind of where we're at and what we've got going on. And I would agree with Brian and what he said about, giving us some time to be able to look at things. And all the other permitting agencies have been great with sharing information and making sure we're all, reviewing the same project, which is sometimes not always the case if joint applications get modified or morphed over the process. And so I think we've come a long way with that. I'm looking forward to hopefully potential opportunities in the future to streamline, make the joint application truly a joint application. One door in and then parsed out to everybody that needs it would be phenomenal. But I think that's a long ways off, and that takes a lot higher level stuff than what I think us working folks can do. But one thing that I'm going to turn it over to Jaron really quick to talk about, we just reissued, after some serious significant modifications, our Regional General Permit 14 for natural disaster recovery and emergency actions. And so I'm going to turn it over to Jaron so she can, hopefully run through that and give you guys a quick 5-minute update on that and how useful we hope it will be.
Hello, everyone. It looks like maybe screen sharing has been disabled, but I wanted to let you know where you could find. It's a new regional general permit that we, in Montana, we had an emergency general permit in the past, but we specifically went through and updated it this last year in response to a lot of the flooding, but we've made it not just to encompass flooding, but other sorts of emergencies that could happen, natural disasters in the area. So it includes flooding, fire, mud or rock slides, drought, and then like with the recent rail car derailment, something like wrecks, explosions, any kind of spills. We've created this regional general permit that's specific to all waters in Montana. And I know as I've worked with other state and federal partners, the U.S. Army Corps has some, we have our nationwide permit program, which we've tried to fit a lot of these flood related projects into, but there's some points that can be really sticky for timelines, as far as the U.S. Army Corps has certain thresholds for lengths that are difficult for these flood projects to fit within, or some of the timelines are just, it's so time important to be able to do these repairs before the high water in spring. And so we're caught up against these timelines. So this regional general permit, it has been certified by Montana DEQ. We do have a 401 water quality certificate from them. We have one from the CSKT, the Confederated Salish and Kootenai Tribes, and then we also have the 401 water quality certificate from the EPA for the tribes that they oversee, and then the rest of the tribes have waived the water quality certificate for this permit. So some of the hurdles that we had of either lengths or amount of materials, or that we would need an individual water quality certificate, a lot of those hurdles would be bypassed with this new regional general permit. It is on our website. Since I can't share my screen, if you just typed into a Google search our acronym, which is USACE, so it stands for U.S. Army Corps Engineers, the first link that would pop up is our Montana regulatory page, and on the left-hand side we have regional general permits, and this is the only regional general permit that we have active right now. I have the permit documents listed there, so the first document would just be a written out form of everything that this regional general permit would cover. It talks about what emergency situations would be. It gives definitions of that, and then it gives what the limits are of this permit. It's up to a ½ acre of permanent loss for to open water, and then ½ acre permanent loss to wetlands for certain thresholds of activity. So I don't really want to go into the weeds of there could be some projects that would fit within this, and I'd like to have one-on-one discussions with people about what those would be. I don't want to just have this be blanket, like, oh, now, all projects will fit under this regional general permit. Jaren talked about it really briefly on this call, and I'm just going to run with that. We'd love to talk with applicants and make sure that, their project would fit within this regional general permit. But if there's any questions I can answer about that right now, or I'd love if there's anyone that thinks they may have a project that would fit it, I'd love to have separate conversations with people about that specifically.
Hey, Jaren, I tried to make you a co-host of the screen sharing, but it looks like Keenan shared a link. That link in the chat, is that the one that you were talking about?
That is, and it looks like maybe I can share my screen, so I'll quick share it if that won't take a lot of everybody's time.
If you want to do that just really quick, just to show, because I was having a hard time seeing that on there myself.
Sure.
Which one you were talking about?
I'm hoping, are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So what I have pulled up right now, here's our U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, our regulatory. Down here is our regional general permits, and I've already, if you clicked on that, it pulls up this page here, and then so here's Montana's regional general permits. This first link will pull up all of these documents together, but otherwise I have them broken out by the permit documents. So this first one is the main language of the actual permit.
Oh, wait, Sage, what were you saying?
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I was just telling Jaren it wasn't showing it yet, but now it is.
Oh, okay. So this first link here will show all of the documents below. It'll show the 8 hyperlinks below. This first one is like the main big link. And then each of these links below will just pull up the one document. So we have it by, here's all the permit documents themselves. So this first link is the language of the actual permit. The second is, how would you notify how would you notify the U.S. Army Corps that you have a project that is an emergency and would fit under this? And then what are the conditions for you to be able to use this permit? We have our 401 water quality certificates that have been granted by these 3 certifying authorities. And then the remaining tribes that have certifying authority in Montana have waived the general water quality certificate, but we do have the ones that have issued or granted a water quality certificate. They have certain conditions, and so we have those listed so the applicants could make sure their project fits within it. And then lastly, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, they put in some recommendations for endangered species with these emergency projects, and some of the recommendations for if there were endangered species in your project area. I'm going to wait for the next, has the next screen loaded there. It should be the language of the actual permit itself. Can anyone let me know if you can see that?
We can see it.
Yeah, we can see it.
Great. So it is issued for the general public, including federal, state, or local agencies to be able to use it. It is available in all of the jurisdictional waters of the U.S. within the state of Montana. There's specifics in the general conditions about some of our special areas, like our wild and scenic rivers, peatlands, our special river management zone in that Upper Yellowstone area. And then gives definition of what an actual emergency, what we would define as an emergency situation when you could use this. And then it really gets into the meat of what kind of projects would fit, what are the thresholds of areas that you could impact and still fit within this project. And then we've gone through and marked the different activities based on what kind of category. The first category would be if you're just going to temporarily impact the aquatic resource. And then we give lots of examples of what a temporary impact might be, or reasons, that you would be temporarily impacting it. Then the next category is permanent work. What kind of permanent, repairs could you do that are emergency related? And again, then we have lots of examples of what kind of work would fit within that. So we're really hoping that with these examples, we've tried to capture a lot of, we went through and looked at a lot of the work that was needed post-flood. We went back and looked historically at other emergencies we've had and tried to capture a lot that would fit within this to kind of streamline our permitting process. So in future, this might be a pathway to at least speed up or give an avenue for applicants. This next one that I have pulled up is how you would notify us that you have a project that you think fits this permit. So we have our preferred method to contact us would be just to send us an email with an electronic package. We do obviously accept, if you can't submit via email, then send it to us by slow mail. But we're hoping that, we could speed up how quickly applicants could let us know that they have a project. And that just briefly gives what kind of info you would need to try and send us.
Yeah. Thanks for that,
so
Sharon.
We could make a permitting decision.
Yeah, thanks for that. Just in the interest of allowing some time for other agencies to speak, if you could just drop that link in the chat again, that would be really helpful. And then maybe during the Q&A session, if people have more time or more questions about that, we can jump in on that then.
Sounds
Thank
great.
you. It looks like we're still waiting to hear from NRC. Oh, and I also had I don't know if this was Army Corps or maybe DNRC, if you wanted to talk about the Silver Jackets program, which we've been hearing about a little bit, but I know we're still trying to hear from DNRC as well as NRCS. NRCS is unmuted, so maybe we'll go with them.
Yeah, there you go. Hi, Terry. This is Rob Molenchek, NRCS Program Manager for Emergency Watershed Protection Program. I think most of you know our program is active. I would like to say that it should be named a flood recovery, not emergency, because it really isn't an emergency program. It's a flood recovery program because we are still actively working. We've allocated about $9 million to 4 counties throughout the state. We are working with 5 sponsors to get those approximately 60 projects, flood recovery projects, completed and constructed. Right now, we're attempting to get most of those projects done by the end of the year, this year. But I do anticipate, given that we had some of our projects waitlisted and we receive funding later that we will probably extend that beyond the end of this year. In terms of barriers, and I guess I like to consider them more of challenges than barriers, because there's always a mechanism to get around some of these barriers. But I think the biggest, has been said, the challenge is capacity, right? With any disaster events, it's chaos, and it is a capacity issue, because most of us do our day-to-day jobs and all of a sudden there's an emergency. Not only did we run into capacity issues, well, we did run into capacity issues with sponsors. One, we had a little difficulty even getting sponsors because they didn't have the capacity to get this done. But we had sponsors come to the table, and I give them a lot of credit because it is a big lift. It is a big lift for local sponsors. All our money has to go through local sponsors. It's a big lift for them to try to get multiple projects done with multiple landowners across their counties. So again, capacity is a huge issue. And then of course we have our internal challenges, of course. And I'll just mention a few of those. We are on a timeline to get our damage assessments reports done to try to identify what projects are eligible for EWP. And that is a quick timeline. So it's 60 days from the event. And therefore, given the chaos, a lot of people get left out, number one. But I think a bigger challenge is we have to do these assessments quickly, and sometimes we don't have all the information. So when we actually get them in the program and actually move into the analysis and engineering, we find that there's likely a better cost-effective solution, a better solution. So we're always in the mode of trying to readjust to actually what really supports the project. We run into issues where maybe the cost is much higher than the actual value of the property we're protecting. So we run into that issue. We always run into the issue is it's never done fast enough, right? We can't get these things done fast enough. And that's why I reemphasize flood recovery, because usually the best solution isn't done fast, right? Usually the best solution has some kind of science to support it. And even with our engineering evaluations, we don't have the best information, and we have to make decisions to move forward because of our timeline. So again, challenges would be, again, and it was talked about earlier, is going more into that flood prevention mode, where you have the assessments of structures at risk. You have the channel migration corridors mapped. All that information helps in making better decisions. And that's always a challenge for us. We're reacting as opposed to being proactive. And our emphasis is trying to just keep these structures from having additional damage in the future from high flow events. So I guess that's kind of how I capture EWP, and unless anybody has any specific questions.
Thanks, Robert. I think, yeah, we'll have a little time if people, I just think we haven't heard yet from DNRC, and I don't know if Peter Brown, is still on here. I think those are our two remaining state and federal partners on here.
I could defer, Terry. I feel like I'm not the most appropriate DNRC person to be talking. I have a couple thoughts. But if Peter wants to say something, I would, just hold off. And I'm hoping Army Corps could talk about silver jackets. I was hoping somebody from the DNRC floodplains program would be able to attend, but I think they're traveling and on vacation right now too.
Sarah, thanks for deferring. I don't have a lot to add today. This is a great conversation. It really helps me from the private philanthropic side understand what the needs are in our communities for the capacity to deliver the programs that are out there. And I think there's some really, there's some really great guidance from outside of Montana, and it's hard to be able to access that guidance and when we're in the middle of an emergency. But I think I do hear that people are really interested in that long-term planning and resilience, and that's going to be a necessary part of first of all, creating the system we all want to live next to in our rivers, but also second, really managing for trying to reduce our costs in the future for maintenance of bad infrastructure. So I think there's some good guidance out there that we can all think about, especially in the nature-based solutions category. And the green infrastructure, green and gray infrastructure, that might be a good option for some of our communities to really become more resilient in the future.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. And there's actually a resource on that from EPA on that disaster recovery resources page as well. I think maybe a couple on there too. Yeah, did anybody from the Army Corps, or are you able to talk about the Silver Jackets program? Anyone from Army Corps?
Yeah, this is Sage again. Unfortunately, it's not a program that falls under the regulatory program. And so I know very, very little about it and couldn't even tell you the major updates that have been, any that have occurred lately. Unfortunately, it'd be nice if we had Tony on the line, but he would probably be the best one to talk about that.
Thanks for clarifying, Sage. I can get back in touch with floodplains at DNRC, and in our notes as a follow-up to this meeting, I'll just include some of their updates about the program. I do know that it's sort of an interagency kind of convening group, and I know they've been looking at projects and talking with landowners as well, and I'm not quite sure what the status of all of that is. Just from DNRC's perspective, our hydrologists have been out doing high watermark surveys to inform like future modeling efforts. So they've been working on that since the flooding. I think that's all done and that's all available on USGS's website. And so I could share that link. I'll plan to do that. Yeah, as I mentioned, our floodplains program is participating with the Silver Jackets. We'll get you more information on that as well. From the planning side of things, I've helped a little bit with ARPA grant writing, which seems funny because it's DNRC that is like administering ARPA funds, but at the same time, that lack of capacity in communities is real. And so as a planner, I kind of helped fill those gaps a little bit also. We're doing a comprehensive water balance model in the Upper Yellowstone right now that will potentially be really helpful in forecasting future events and looking at different scenarios. So that should be completed in the next couple of years. We're really excited about that project, and we've hired a hydrologic technician to help collect data this year. And let's see, last couple of things in terms of addressing barriers. I'm just going to throw the link in for DNRC's staff that manages ARPA grants. I really hear what you said, Brooke, about just the challenges of like, okay, and Sharon mentioned this, we have this funding, but like, what does that mean and when do we get it? And I've heard from a lot of people, it's like, okay, we've got this ARPA grant, but we haven't heard from anybody in months. So how do we get this on the ground? So I know DNRC has been hiring additional ARPA staff to address this, and I'm just going to throw that link in for the ARPA. You can just scroll down and find the ARPA people. It shouldn't be too hard in the funding folks. And lastly, DNRC is working hard this legislative session to make water right permitting and changes easier through House Bill 114, which has gotten a lot of good like multi-entity support from like realtors and Senior Water Rights Coalition and just kind of across the board, Trout Unlimited. And essentially it's just making this horrible administrative process currently that takes forever to like change your point of diversion or something, say in response to flooding, a lot easier and smoother and less expensive for people to go through. So hopefully that gets enacted and will kind of help in the future. That's all I'm going to say about DNRC stuff. Thank you.
Thanks for stepping in, Sarah, on that. And also for just a note that Sarah has taken notes for us and thank you for doing that and co-facilitating with me. Looks like Greg's got a question, and I think we're officially in our Q&A and discussion portion. So go ahead, Greg.
Thanks, Sarah. You mentioned the high water mark, and that's a question that I'm getting here is, did the flooding last year, is that going to recalibrate the high water mark? And how can landowners find out more information about that?
Yeah, I think that I remember talking with Brooke or someone about this, but as far as like, I guess I'm not a great person to answer this question, but I think when I say high water mark, I mean like the flood extent, just for future, like looking at future flood scenarios. I'm not talking about anything to do with permitting and how that will change. But I can get you more information on that. But someone from FWP or something maybe could speak to that. I'm not sure.
Oh, Sarah, just put it on us. That's fine. No, I'm just kidding. Totally. Yeah, exactly. You know, I will. I think the answer right now is we're probably not sure. Because the channel is there's a lot of loose material in the channel right now, and it's going to reorganize itself again probably this year and into the future, until that ordinary high water mark's kind of reestablished. Right now, we certainly have seen a lot of debris and gravel deposited that have actually raised the stream bed in some areas, which might actually show that high water mark is a little further up on the bank than it had been in the past. But I think really what it comes down to is we're not 100% sure yet. I know that's not an answer that folks want to hear exactly, but you know, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about, that we don't really know, like the mussel shell, they didn't really know what was done until 3 or 4 years after the fact. So we might be in a little bit of a waiting game for that.
Thanks for that, Brian. Anybody else questions? I know I saw, I know Wendy dropped something in the chat about, you know, how do we, considering capacity of all of our agency, across federal and state agencies, what can we do to convey this pressing and ongoing issue to our state legislature, federal delegation, and the governor's office? Just wanted to read that one out loud.
I have more of a, this is DeWitt Dominic with the Parks CD. I wanted to bring up one issue that's come up recently on some applications with regard to the Montana DEQ 401 certification. And maybe the Corps, someone from the Corps could address this more succinctly than I can. But if a project is deemed of a scale large enough that it does not fall under the Corps' ability to provide the 401 for, say, a bank repair or bank stabilization project. Apparently, there is a process now with the DEQ that puts the onus on the applicant to file for the 401. And that is maybe not a new thing, but the issue is that there is a 30-day waiting period to even process or even to file 401 once there's a notification of intent to file. And maybe someone from the Corps could better explain what exactly that means. But obviously we're up against some permitting and some projects that the applicants are trying to get something accomplished before high water. And then we have this extra layer of permitting with the 401. So I'll just throw that out there.
Yeah, hi, this is Keenan Star. I'm the 401 coordinator. It'd probably be appropriate for me to answer this one. I suppose the Corps. So yeah, the way that a lot of these bank stabilization projects have been couched. I mean, first it goes to the Corps for them to couch them under a nationwide permit. And we've denied bank stabilization projects for most of the nationwide permits that are being used for all these repairs. For any projects, bank stabilization projects greater than 300 linear feet. So It's getting, it's been quite a few. So then they have to come to me for that individual 401. And yeah, you're right. You got to request that. It says pre-filing meeting request. This is probably going to go away anyways. This is a rule that was written in 2020 that required this 30-day kind of pause essentially in the permitting timeframe. And the current administration is looking at changing that. So then I'll be able to waive that 30-day request. I don't know what the time frame is for that 401 rule. It's I think the WOTUS rule kind of took precedence for up until that was just published or went into effect last month. And now I think probably 401 is going to get a little bit more just attention from the administration in terms of getting this rule rolled out. But I mean, the good news is, I don't know, Sage could talk to this now with that RGP 14. So we 401 certified that. So then you wouldn't even have to come to me for that individual 401 certification if they're able to couch these current or any projects essentially going forward from when this RGP 14 was issued. If they're able to couch it under that, then you wouldn't have to come to me for that individual 401. But yeah, I mean, essentially, if you think it's going to be a big project, tell everybody, just email me immediately. And just all you have to say is, I'd like to request a pre-filing meeting for this project at my property. And that checks that box. It's a pretty, it's a pretty vague rule. And so really just, saying that word, request a pre-filing meeting, will check that box. And I've been prioritizing processing all these applications for flood response anyway. So folks, they're getting placed at the top of the stack for when I process these. I'm the one guy processing all the applications for individual 401 certifications, and then the 318 authorizations. When FWP doesn't issue that for like a 310, then they'll kick them my way. So typically I'm processing these as a 318 authorization, and then I've waived every single 401 for flood related projects. So that's kind of been, I don't know if that makes sense, but like 45, a lot of these have been couched under that nationwide 45. So anything greater than 300 linear feet has to come into my office. So that's when that individual 401, the 30 days kicks in, that 30-day pre-filing meeting request. And yeah, it's a goofy thing. I mean, you are not the first person to be frustrated by it. I was probably the first person to actually be frustrated by it in the state. So hopefully it goes away first. Hopefully more projects can be couched under RGP 14. And then second, within the next year, that's just going to go away completely anyways. So going forward, we won't have to wait that 30 days. So.
Okay.
Yep, to jump
thanks,
in,
Keaton.
this is Sage, and provided that the projects are related to an emergency, natural disaster, emergency situation, we can look at them for verification under the RGP. If it's long-term erosion, it's been happening for years, decades, however, that's probably not something that would be considered an emergency unless it's directly impacting structures immediately, due to that high water year or something along those lines.
I guess I just have a follow-up question. So it appears that I'm over the hump in terms of processing these. It's been quiet on the front for essentially mid-November was when I started receiving applications, joint applications. It appears to have taken about 6 months for folks that were impacted to kind of get, everything together, hire consultants. And so really the consultants started applying for applications in pre-filing meeting requests, I would say in early November. And then I've been chewing through a lot of applications. And right now I only have a few more applications relating to flood related projects. Do you anticipate, or does anybody anticipate a lot more projects coming down the pipe, or what's it sound like out there on the ground?
This is Sharon with the Conservation District. So yeah, we're starting to get them coming in. pretty good. And then we do have quite a few more of the EWP projects that we'll need to get, we'll be going through the process once we have the engineering done. So yeah, I foresee a pretty busy season.
I concur on the Army Corps side.
Yeah, I'd second that from Park County standpoint.
So I would just recommend always just email me with that pre-filing meeting request. Once you email it to me, it's good forever. You could email me today and then submit it 6 months from now. You know, it doesn't expire. Just to always get out in front of it, email me, burn up that clock as soon as you possibly can if you see a project come in that could potentially need that individual 4-1 certification.
Thanks,
Okay, so for Sharon, or for the Stillwater and Carbon, I might see when I see Brian next to kind of maybe look through the projects we have and see what his thoughts are. And I guess go start sending you some emails.
Yeah. Thanks for all that. Just as we're getting close to the end here, I saw a suggestion from Wendy in the chat. I don't know if folks are interested in collaborating on a letter to some of our elected officials on this. I can certainly connect. We've got the spreadsheet of everybody's contacts if anybody is interested in spearheading that effort and getting some of those thoughts on here. I can definitely send out people's contacts and support that whatever we can. Any other needs, just as we're getting close to the end, things that we still need, things to be thinking about for the near and longer future.
This is Sharon again. We are trying to put together, I'm hoping for something here pretty soon of a panel like the Carbon County did, but for Stillwater, because we are getting a lot of calls, emails, concerns about what to do, how this is going to affect, should they start giving sandbags, where to get sandbags. I think with the warm weather that's going to be coming up, there's probably going to be another panic that happens. So if we can nip it in the bud, get the information out to the public as soon as possible, I think it'll make all the agencies' jobs a little bit easier. And if the people know what they're doing, then it's going to be a lot easier on us. That way we can just do the work instead of having to educate them on how to do the work, or what to do. So
yeah, and hopefully Sharon, I know you've been working with Carbon County and they just hosting that one, and so hopefully, and I know Park County has had one of these, so hopefully there's some cross-pollination that can happen there with helping you host that meeting for the Stillwater.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, my suggestion is just in the spirit of doing something from this effort, talking about all the issues, like maybe we're assuming all of our elected officials know all these things. I'm guessing not, and making a pretty strong statement of lack of resources, funding that's available when the next one hits, because that will happen. So that was, I guess, why I brought this up, highlighting the number of challenges that all these communities in Montana are facing, and could there be something done to allocate additional capacity and funding towards, not repeating history over and over and over again.
Yeah. Wendy, that's such a good point. And I do think, again, Sarah's, taking some great notes, and maybe just pulling something from those notes. And I mean, if people think that's of value, I think it would be a pretty easy thing for some, maybe not me, to just take those notes and put it into a letter format. And then I'd be happy to distribute to everybody and see who on this call or beyond wants to sign on to it. I don't think that, that could be a fairly easy way of doing it. So just to wrap up, I did get a number of links here in the chat that I'll be adding to that email, and okay, Great. Thanks, Sage. Yeah, FYI for Stillwater County and for everyone. Sage just dropped a note in the chat there. But yeah, we've had a lot of links in the chat, and I'll definitely share all of those. I'll add those to that resource page and send a link out to everybody with a follow-up email. I know Sarah is going to put some sort of meeting takeaways and general themes from the meeting as part of those notes that should help us distill some of this down. And my next question really is just, are these meetings continuing to be helpful? Do you all want to meet again in 6 months? What would be most helpful going forward?
Terry, I think it would be really helpful for this group to meet again. You know, I just think of our URAC that's functioning in the Upper Yellowstone and how we've pivoted some of our goals and focuses, you know, as time has just plodded along post flood. And I would be really curious from a URAC perspective to hear in the second season post flood how some of that permitting and interagency coordination is going. So a vote from Park here. Yeah.
Others, if you want to, maybe you could do like an emoji thumbs up or something if you think a meeting in, it would be October if we're sticking to the 6 months, which seems reasonable. That would be getting through the whole season again. Okay, seeing thumbs ups. Great. Okay, so since we're on the call, I mean, basically October, I had looked at some dates. October 2nd or 16th are also Mondays. It would be the same. That's the same time we've met so far. Would this time frame, this 10 to noon on October 2nd or 16th work? Is there anybody who has a major conflict on one of those dates? Otherwise, I might just make it October 2nd, and then we'd be exactly 6 months out and have a pretty good idea of the field season. So hearing no objections, I think we'll just do 10 to noon on October 2nd. I will send out a calendar invite along with all this information. And one thing I forgot to say is that I did hear some people mention, I can't remember who anymore, mentioned developing some new best management practices and some other things that I know were not in the chat and maybe aren't ready to be shared. But if there are any additional resources that you didn't put in the chat that you think would be useful for members of this group to see, please just email those to me. I think everybody has my email, or you will when I email out the results. Sarah is going to wrap up these notes and include some takeaways on there. I'll include that as well. May take me a week or so, but I'll eventually get that email out to everybody, and I'll get you that calendar invite for October 2nd, 10 to noon. I'll just get that out right away as soon as we're done here. Sarah, did you have any parting thoughts? No? Okay. Or anyone else? Or we'll just give you 2 minutes of your day back. Great. Well, thank you, everybody.
I'm going to put in the chat a link to the story map that came out of the URAC committee with Park County, and it kind of covers like it's like a post-flood Yellowstone River recovery basics. It was done a little bit ago, but it might, I don't know, might help not reinvent the wheel for some of you if you haven't seen it already.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for, drop that in. Fantastic.
Actually, a bit more involved in that than I am, but.
Okay. Great. Well, yeah, thank you so much, everybody. Thanks to all the local people, all our state and federal partners. This really is, I hope, helpful to everybody just to see what we're all working with and doing the best we can to cross-pollinate and help one another where we can. So thank you so much. More info, and there's that link from Jeanette in the chat. Thank you all so much. Take care.
Thanks, Terry. Have a good one, everybody.
Thank you.